Welcome to Virginia This Morning. I'm Jessica Nall. Our first guest is a publisher. He's the publisher of Black Ocean, as well as an annual poetry journal called Handsome. Poets often have a way with words, putting pen to paper and churning some creative thoughts. And he's in town promoting his new book, a collection of poetry called The Truth Is, We Are Perfect. You have the chance to meet him tonight for a signing. We welcome Jonica Stucky to Virginia This Morning. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jessica.
You just got into town yesterday,
Last
not your
night,
first visit to Richmond.
No, not at all.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
You're here for book signing.
I am going to be at Chop Suey Books tonight. I've actually been there a couple times before. I have some good friends here in Richmond, so I'm looking forward to it. This is my first stop on a tour down through the South and the Midwest. So.
It's a multi-city tour.
It is, yeah. A few cities as well as a couple of festivals too. My book's coming out with Third Man Books. It's the first book with Third Man Books, which is a publishing imprint of Third Man Records, Jack White of the White Stripes, his new publishing endeavor. So, you know, I'm a big believer in live performances for poetry, and I think it's a nice synergy being on a record label for the book.
When I had the information about you, I was digging a little deeper, and you have such an interesting background. You were born in Boston and originally named Jonathan.
Yes. So Jonathan is the name that continues to be on my birth certificate. But when I was 8 months old, my parents, Guru, named me Jonica. Jonica is the name of an Indian Hindu king. It means one who has wisdom. And he's sort of a King Solomon type character. And the story goes is when he met me when I was a baby, he said, this one's going to be a leader, so he should also be wise, and call him Jonica.
And that clearly influences what you do today, because you've been a leader in developing, as you said, kind of this convergence of music and poetry and bringing it into, or bringing it out of what I was reading, the coffee houses, and into more mainstream.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up as a lover of poetry, and I think the thing that we, as a culture, we often turn to poetry in times of crisis, when we have some sort of communal tragedy. We often try to make meaning out of it through language. I mean, language is the building block of our consciousness. The problem is when we only turn to poetry in times of crisis, it's like if you only eat when you're starving, even dog food tastes good. So I've always believed that if we could consume poetry on a more regular basis, it would sort of refine our taste for it, and it would actually serve us more powerfully when we really need it. That's why I've sort of struggled throughout, whether it's with Black Ocean or my own work and touring, reading at some sort of unconventional places where people don't always usually read poetry on a regular basis.
Is that why there's such a great partnership with music?
I think so. I think people often have their guard up about poetry, and they think they're not going to understand it, it's going to be too difficult, it's going to be complicated, but music is such a popular form, and really, you know, music and poetry share the same ancestry, so I think it's a nice way to sort of bypass people's walls about it.
Another super interesting nugget that I'm sure everybody asks you about, you worked as an undertaker for about 7 years.
I did, yeah. I started working in the funeral business when I was in grad school to put myself through college. And I wanted something, I had 3 criteria. I wanted something that was interesting, had flexible hours, and where I could help people. And my first choice was actually to be an EMT or a paramedic, but I was already in grad school, would have had to go to school for that as well. And in Massachusetts, you can get a paid apprenticeship at a funeral home without going to mortuary science school. So I did that. I thought I'd just do it for 2 years in grad school, and I ended up staying in the business for 7 years.
And I think it's probably likely then that people would say, well, with such a heavy role that you played in working with folks and family, you know, who are celebrating the life of a loved one, oftentimes we turn to poetry at that time too.
Absolutely. You know, there's sort of this idea that we can practice losing ourselves or practice losing other people, and that somehow that's going to inure us to the real tragedy of loss. But in my experience, it's not until we're actually in the middle of our grief process that that we can really become comfortable with it. And so I guess what I really try to do is embrace that loss in the moment when it happens. And in that sense, it's not so much that you're protected against it, it's that you become rich with absence. And in that way, it really begins to mean something.
Well, looking forward to reading more about your insights. The Truth Is We Are Perfect. It's a brand new book that's out. Jonica Stucky, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having
Super
me,
nice
Jessica.
to meet you. Good
Thank
luck
you.
tonight at Chop Suey. He will read more from his poetry collection, The Truth Is We Are Perfect. That happens tonight at 6 o'clock at Chop Suey Books on West Carey Street. We wish him the best of luck and thank him for coming in today.